Welcome. Tonight's story is shared in a gentle voice. Take a deep breath. And let's begin. Part 1. My name is Gloria Harris. I'm 64 years old, and I've always believed that dignity speaks louder than anger. I don't raise my voice. I don't slam doors. I listen. I watch. And when the moment is right, I act. That's why, when my daughter-in-law strolled into brunch wearing a diamond necklace I'd never seen before, paired with earrings that practically screamed new money, I didn't say a word. I poured her coffee. I smiled. And I let her keep talking about her little getaway to Palm Beach like I hadn't just received a fraud alert from my bank the night before. $53,000 charged to my credit card. Jewelry, resort bookings, spa treatments, designer luggage, every transaction time-stamped, approved, and traced back to a store 3 blocks from where she lives. And yet there she was, laughing like nothing had happened, thanking me for hosting brunch like she hadn't emptied half my savings in one weekend. I didn't tell her I already knew. I let her take the last piece of lemon tart and ask if I had any extra pearls she could borrow for an event. I nodded, said I'd check, and walked straight to my study. I didn't cry. I didn't call my son. I just opened the drawer where I kept the copies of everything, every bill, every receipt, every message. I've spent a lifetime being underestimated because I make good casseroles and keep my hair tidy. But my husband taught me 2 things before he passed. Never put anything in writing unless you're ready to see it in court, and never, ever let a thief feel comfortable in your house. So when I heard her laughing with my grandkids in the living room, I smiled. Then I called my lawyer. I didn't call right away. First, I waited until Monday. I wanted her to think she'd gotten away with it. That's the thing with people like her, they mistake silence for weakness. They don't realize that some of us were raised in a time when you never made a scene, but you always made a point. So I let her enjoy her little victory. On Monday morning, she posted a photo on social media, her hand resting on a sun hat, a mimosa in the background, and on her wrist, a diamond bracelet that looked suspiciously like the one from the invoice I now kept tucked in my desk. I liked the post. Just once. No comment. No emoji. Just a quiet acknowledgement that I saw everything. That same morning, I walked into my bank branch with my folder of documentation and asked to speak with Linda. She's the branch manager. We've played bridge together for 12 years. I didn't even need to explain. One glance at the papers, and she already knew what I was asking. She placed a soft hand on mine and said, "Gloria, do you want to press charges?" I told her not yet. First, I wanted to give my son a chance to fix this. He's a good man. Busy, distracted, but not unkind. And maybe, just maybe, he didn't know. So I called him that evening and invited him over. "Just you," I said. "It's been a while." He sounded surprised but agreed. He came by after work, loosened his tie, and kissed me on the cheek, like he used to before she came into the picture. I poured him tea. I asked how things were, and then I slid the folder across the table. He opened it. His face changed slowly, like the truth was unzipping something inside him. "Is this recent?" he asked. I nodded. "Last weekend," I said. "Palm Beach, Cartier, spa services, my card." He rubbed his forehead. "She said her mother paid." I just looked at him, let the silence bloom. He closed the folder. "I'll talk to her." "No," I said calmly. "You'll listen, and you'll decide who you're married to, her or your conscience." He left without finishing his tea. The next day, I received flowers. A large bouquet of lilies, her favorite. No card, just an envelope of receipts. All returned, all cancelled, but no apology, no call, not even a knock on my door. She thought that would be the end of it, that the money was all I cared about. She forgot who raised the man she married. She forgot I never forget. So I waited 2 more days, and then I called Linda back. Yes, I said, let's file it officially. The report was filed on a Thursday. By Friday morning, my phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. 30 minutes later, another call. This time I answered. Mrs. Harris, the voice said, too polished to be nervous, too rehearsed to be genuine. This is Detective Monroe with the Financial Crimes Unit. We received your complaint regarding unauthorized use of your credit card. I confirmed the details, answered every question calmly. I wasn't angry. I was precise. When he asked if I suspected the identity of the individual, I said, I do. Are you prepared to press charges against a family member? He asked. I took a breath. I'm prepared to press charges against a thief. Silence. Then, a quiet, understood, ma'am. The next few hours were quiet, unusually so. No texts from my son, no emails, no knocks on the door. Around 3 p.m., I saw her car pull up across the street, not in the driveway, like family, but on the curb, like a stranger. She sat in the front seat for 5 full minutes before getting out. I stayed in the kitchen, wiping down the same countertop 3 times over. When she finally knocked, it was soft, hesitant. I didn't rush. I let her knock again. Then I opened the door. She was dressed well, too well. Makeup flawless, heels deliberate, jewelry absent. Gloria, she began, voice thin. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I didn't invite her in. I stood firm. A misunderstanding is leaving your umbrella in someone's car. This was theft. Her mouth opened, then closed. She tried again. It was just a mistake. I meant to pay you back. With what? I asked. Your influencer discount code. That hit. Her jaw tensed. I've already returned everything. No, I said. You gave it back. That's not the same. She looked behind me, hoping to see my son. I'm sure, but he wasn't there. He hadn't been back since I showed him the folder. This could ruin everything, she said. It already has, I replied. But not for me. She stepped back. You don't want to do this. You'll split the family. I smiled. Not with my mouth, but with something deeper, colder. You did that the moment you looked at my name on the card and thought it was yours. She left in silence. No threats, no tantrum, just silence. That night, I sat at the dining table alone. The same one where she used to boast about her skincare line and ask if I still had my old pearls. I poured a glass of wine and waited. At 8:12 p.m., my phone rang again. This time, it was my son. His voice was tired. She told me you pressed charges. I did, I said, because she committed a crime. She says you want to ruin her. I let that hang. Then I asked, do you think I'm wrong? He didn't answer right away. No, he said finally, but I don't know what to do. I felt a pang, not guilt, but grief. Grief for the boy who used to hold my hand at the grocery store and ask if I needed help with the bags. Grief for the man who now stood between loyalty and justice. Do what's right, I said softly, or do nothing. But don't ask me to pretend again. He exhaled. She's moving out. That was all. No apology. No defense. Just fact. And that, oddly enough, was the first time I felt peace in weeks. The next morning, I woke up to silence. No calls. No messages. The kind of quiet that feels like a held breath before a storm. I made my coffee, sat by the window, and watched the street. Her car was gone. His too. I imagined them in separate rooms, avoiding each other. I imagined her packing slowly, fuming, thinking of what to say, who to blame. I knew she wouldn't go quietly. She'd spin it, call me bitter, controlling, dramatic. But it didn't matter. Truth has weight. And I had all the receipts. Round noon, I received a letter, hand-delivered. No return address. Inside was a short note written in her handwriting. I hope this made you feel powerful. You win. I read it once, folded it, and placed it in the drawer beside the canceled charges. I didn't need power. I needed peace. And for the first time in months, I had it. That evening, my son returned. Alone? No suitcase, no announcements. Just a man who looked older than he had the week before. He sat down at the same table, the same chair where I'd handed him the folder. She's gone, he said. For now, at least. I nodded. He looked at me differently. Not like his mother. Not like someone he needed to protect, but like someone who had just taught him something he wished he'd known sooner. I should have seen it, he said. No, I replied. You wanted to believe the best. There's no shame in that. He stayed for dinner. We didn't talk much, just passed the dishes like we used to. And when he left, he kissed my cheek and said, "Thank you for not letting this slide." I didn't respond. I just walked him to the door and locked it behind him. Not out of fear, but out of habit. Because when trust has been broken once, you learn to check the doors twice. If you've ever been underestimated because you were just the mother-in-law, Gloria's story probably hit a nerve. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't chase after an apology. She simply did what so many are too afraid to do. She held the line. But this family drama is far from over. In part 2, someone unexpected shows up at Gloria's door. And they're not just there to apologize. Part 2. They tried to settle it quietly. But I'd already made my decision. The doorbell rang at 9:07 the next morning. I hadn't finished my tea. I wasn't expecting anyone. And after everything, I certainly wasn't in the mood for more drama. I opened the door slowly, expecting maybe a courier, maybe a neighbor. But it wasn't either. It was her mother, perfectly dressed, painfully polite, clutching a handbag that looked like it hadn't been used since the Reagan administration. "Gloria," she said, nodding once. "May I come in?" I stepped aside without a word. She walked in like she'd been here before, which, of course, she had, back when the engagement was still fresh and we were still playing nice. She sat at the kitchen table without waiting to be offered a seat and folded her hands neatly. "You've made things complicated," she said. I raised an eyebrow. "I didn't steal anything." She smiled, tight. "My daughter may have crossed a line, but airing family matters through legal channels, that invites gossip." I took a long sip of my tea. I don't care what people whisper. I care what she did. She tilted her head. She panicked. She was under pressure. She made poor decisions. But they were emotional, not malicious. I leaned forward. She spent $53. Zero of my money without asking. She signed my name. That's not emotional. That's criminal. She sighed, clearly frustrated I wasn't playing along. There are other ways to resolve things, Gloria. Quiet ways. Discreet ways. Like pretending nothing happened. I asked. Like letting her wear stolen jewelry to brunch. Like understanding the bigger picture. She snapped. Divorce. Custody. Assets. Do you really want to escalate this? I sat back, suddenly understanding what this really was. She wasn't here for reconciliation. She was here for containment, damage control, reputation management. She can get divorced, I said calmly. She can lose assets. That's not my concern. Her lips tightened. You want to punish her? No, I said. I want her to learn that actions have consequences. And I want you to stop enabling her like she's still 16. Her jaw clenched. You've always looked down on us. No, I replied. But I see you now. She stood abruptly, smoothed her jacket, and without another word, walked out the front door. I watched her leave, heels clicking down the driveway, and I knew, without a doubt, that wasn't the last I'd hear from her. I didn't tell anyone she came. Not my son. Not my neighbor Helen, who always pretended not to be watching from across the street. I didn't even write it down in my journal, and I write everything. I just sat at the window that evening, the curtains barely open, watching the sun drop behind the rooftops, wondering how many conversations like that had happened between women in kitchens, tight smiles, veiled warnings, unspoken truths cloaked in suggestions. That weekend, I went to church. I wore a navy coat and pearl earrings. I sat in the fourth pew, like always, but people looked at me differently, not with pity, with caution, respect, maybe. Even the pastor hesitated for a second before shaking my hand. That's when I realized word had spread. Small towns don't need newspapers. They have coffee shop whispers and women's groups that know before the police reports do. I didn't flinch. I didn't hide. I simply nodded and smiled, as if to say, yes, I did what you're all too scared to do. After the service, as I was walking back to my car, a woman I barely knew, a friend of my daughter-in-law's, maybe, walked up to me. Her tone was falsely sweet. Gloria, I'm sure this whole thing has been hard on everyone. I hope you're not letting pride get in the way of forgiveness. I didn't stop walking. I just said, I forgave her the minute I pressed charges. Forgiveness isn't the same as permission. Her jaw dropped, but I was already unlocking my door. That night, my son called again. This time, his voice was more grounded. Mom, he said, she's talking about mediation. She wants to settle everything privately. Everything. I asked. Everything. He confirmed. Assets, separation, full financial disclosure. She's scared. Good, I said. Maybe fear will teach her what decency didn't. He was quiet. Then he said, she's trying to pin some of it on me. Claims I enabled it. That I had to know. I closed my eyes. And did you? Another pause. Then softly, I ignored things. I didn't ask enough questions. I let her handle the money because I didn't want to deal with the stress. So maybe I did enable it. Then learn from it, I said. But don't let her use your guilt to escape accountability. He sighed. I'm staying at a friend's place for now. I don't know where this ends. It ends, I said, when you stop confusing peace with silence. After we hung up, I stared at the phone a while longer. Not in sadness. Not even in anger. Just reflection. I had spent most of my adult life cleaning up other people's messes, quietly making excuses, smoothing things over. pretending for the sake of peace. And here I was, finally doing the one thing that wasn't quiet at all. And I had never felt more clear. That Monday, the mediation papers arrived. A thick envelope, hand-delivered again, this time not by a mother, but by a courier in a pressed uniform who didn't even make eye contact. I opened it at the kitchen table with a steak knife, not out of urgency, but out of ceremony. Inside, statements, proposals, carefully crafted language asking me to withdraw legal pursuit in exchange for restitution, and a binding non-disclosure agreement. In short, hush money. Polite, expensive hush money. I read every line, twice. Then I placed the whole stack in my shredder. Let them come knocking again. I'd answer the same way. But before I could even stand up, the phone rang. This time, it was my lawyer. "Gloria," he said cautiously, "you might want to sit down." I was already seated. "She's pushing back," he said, claiming the card was shared, that you gave her verbal permission. "There's no signature on some charges. She's trying to blur the lines." I let out a slow breath. And what does that mean for us? We're still in the right. But it's messier now. She's hired someone new, a pit bull type. Very aggressive. "Let her," I said. I've faced worse than barking. But still, after the call, my hands trembled. Not with fear, with disappointment. Not in her, not even in the system, but in myself for ever thinking this would go quietly once the truth was out. I went upstairs, opened the chest in my bedroom, and pulled out the file I hadn't touched in years. My husband's old papers, financials, trusts, assets, his sharp handwriting still crisp on the margins. There, in his will, was the clause I remembered but hadn't thought about in so long. In the event of fraudulent activity against my estate, all beneficiaries not acting in good faith will be permanently removed from succession. He'd written that after his brother tried to take advantage during his illness. I closed the file slowly. My daughter-in-law didn't just steal from me. She put herself in a position to lose far more than a few bags and spa treatments. She thought she could play smart, but my husband had been smarter. And I had learned from the best. That night, I called my lawyer back. "Let's not just defend," I said. "Let's go on record." She forged my name, claimed access to funds she never had, and involved others in her lies. "I want a full review of our family trust. That'll make things public," he warned. "Let them be public," I replied. "I've got nothing to hide." For the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. Not because things were settled, but because I finally stopped trying to protect someone who never thought twice about hurting me. 2 days later, the doorbell rang again. This time, it wasn't a courier or a lawyer. It was my son. He didn't call ahead. He didn't bring flowers or excuses. Just himself, tired, heavy-eyed, holding a single manila envelope. I stepped aside without a word, and he walked in like he used to when he was small and afraid to admit something. We sat at the kitchen table, same place this all started. He slid the envelope toward me. "You should read it," he said. I opened it slowly, bracing myself. Inside was a letter. Not typed, not polished, handwritten. Her handwriting. "I know you'll never trust me again, and I don't blame you. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd fix it before you noticed. But I didn't. And then I lied. Again and again. Because the lie became easier than the shame. You didn't deserve that. None of you did." I read the whole thing in silence. It wasn't an apology so much as an unraveling. A quiet confession from someone whose armor had finally cracked. She's moving out of state, my son said. Wants to start over somewhere new. She didn't ask me to come with her. I looked at him carefully. Do you want to? He shook his head. No. I'm done chasing peace that never really existed. I nodded. For the first time. His voice sounded like his father's, calm, steady, clear. I'm staying here for a while, he added. Found a small place across town. Close. Enough to help if you need anything. I smiled faintly. I don't need help, I said, but I wouldn't mind company on Sundays. He smiled back, eyes softer than they'd been in months. You got it. When he left that evening, the house didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt quiet, but not the kind of quiet that hides things. The kind that holds space for something new. I washed the dishes, turned down the lights, and placed her letter in the same drawer as the receipts, the will, and the shredded settlement offer. Not out of bitterness, but because some truths need to be kept, not for revenge, not for leverage, but for memory. So we don't forget how far we've come, or how easily silence can cost us everything. Gloria thought pressing charges would be the hardest part, but when silence turned into strategy, and apologies came wrapped in legal threats, she didn't flinch. She remembered who she was, and who raised the man her daughter-in-law tried to manipulate. But in part 3, Gloria receives an unexpected invitation, one that could either repair the family or destroy what's left of it. Part 3. She thought leaving town ended it, but then I got the invitation. The envelope was cream-colored, thick, expensive, handwritten in gold ink. My name curved across the front like it belonged in a magazine. At first, I thought it was another attempt to settle things, another apology wrapped in calligraphy. But when I opened it, my breath actually caught. It was an invitation, a formal one. My daughter-in-law was throwing a farewell party for herself at a private venue. Dress code, garden elegance. Guest list enclosed, and there, in delicate script, my name. No +1, just me. I stared at it for a long time, not out of confusion, out of sheer disbelief. She was leaving the state, disgraced, legally cornered, marriage fractured, and she wanted to go out in style, with roses, champagne, live music, and me in the audience like nothing had ever happened. I placed the invitation down and walked to the kitchen, made tea, let the kettle scream a little longer than necessary. Part of me wanted to throw it away, ignore it, but another part, the part that had sat silently through years of disrespect, was very, very curious. I waited until evening, then called my son. Did you get one? I asked. He sighed. Yes. Are you going? I wasn't planning to. Do you know why she sent one to me? He paused. She thinks it'll make her look good. That if you show up, everyone will assume it's been forgiven. I nodded slowly. She's playing a part. Again. That's all she knows how to do, he said. Pretend. Perform. I looked at the invitation again. Maybe it's time I join the performance. Mom, he said cautiously. I won't make a scene. I promised. But I won't be silent either. I didn't sleep much that night. I ironed my navy dress, set out my pearls, polished my low heels. Not out of vanity, out of intention. If she wanted appearances, I'd give her one she wouldn't forget. The venue was even more extravagant than I expected. A converted vineyard estate with manicured hedges, fairy lights strung between white trellises, champagne flutes glistening under the late afternoon sun. It was beautiful, artificial, curated, and soulless, just like her apology letter. I arrived, precisely on time. Not early, not late. I wanted her to see me walk in. I wore my navy dress, the pearls my husband gave me on our 30th anniversary, and a pair of low-heeled shoes that clicked confidently against the stone path. Heads turned. Some guests blinked. Some whispered. One woman, her aunt, I think, actually gasped. I didn't greet anyone. I just found a seat near the center of the garden, crossed my legs, and waited. The music played. Champagne was passed round. Everyone acted as if this was normal, a farewell celebration for a woman who had defrauded her husband's family and nearly destroyed their name. And yet there she was, standing under a floral arch in a pastel blue dress like some kind of spiritual guru, sending herself off with grace and delusion. She smiled at the crowd, the cameras. She gave a little speech about growth and starting fresh and learning from mistakes without shame. People clapped. A few even dabbed their eyes. I didn't move. She caught my gaze near the end, faltered for half a second, then looked away quickly. That one flicker told me everything. She knew I was the only person there who remembered the truth. After the speech, there were mingling trays of hors d'oeuvres, laughter, photos. I stayed seated until her mother approached. You came, she said with that same tight smile. Of course, I replied. Would have been rude not to. She's doing better, you know, she offered. She's been through so much. Yes, I said. Self-inflicted wounds often leave scars. Her smile cracked for just a second. Don't ruin this, Gloria. I don't have to, I said quietly. She did that herself. I stood and excused myself before she could respond. But I didn't leave. Not yet. I walked the perimeter of the event, stopping at the display table. Pictures of my daughter-in-law over the years. Notes of well wishes, a guest book. I flipped it open. Page after page of flattering nonsense. Social fluff. Fox support. I took the pen. Wrote one line. Some endings aren't tragedies. They're overdue. Then I closed it and walked away. I didn't wait for dessert. I didn't take a favor bag. I didn't say goodbye. I simply left, the way she should have, quietly, with no applause. I thought that would be the end of it. A quiet exit, a final word. But the very next morning, I received a voicemail from her. Her voice was sharp, clipped, to controlled, to be anything but furious. I saw what you wrote, she said. You couldn't help yourself. Could you? You had to make a scene, even without saying a word. I replayed it twice. She still hadn't learned. Still thought that everything was about her image, about being admired, about shaping the story, and the fact that I didn't play my assigned role, the forgiving elder, the silent supporter, shook her more than if I'd flipped a table. I didn't call back. I didn't respond. But I knew then that she wasn't done. And I was right. That afternoon, I got a call from the venue. Mrs. Harris, the manager said carefully, there seems to be some confusion. Your daughter-in-law claims we lost a valuable necklace during the event and suggested you may have seen something. No, I said. I didn't. She also implied you may have had access to the dressing area. I didn't. Would you be willing to give a written statement to that effect? Happily, I hung up, already sensing the pattern. She was setting the stage again, spinning stories, planting doubt, muddying waters in case anything else came to light. She wasn't leaving town humbled. She was leaving on her own terms, narrating her own version. And if that meant dragging my name through the dust again, She would do it with pearls on and a flute of champagne in hand. So I did something I hadn't planned to do. I pulled out my old photo albums, the showbox of receipts, the emails I'd printed just in case. I began cataloging everything. Dates, times, who was present. Not to fight, not to win, but to prepare. Because women like her don't just disappear. They resurface, reinvented, glossy, and dangerous. And when she did, I wanted the truth preserved in ink. Not gossip, not rumors, evidence. I created a file and labeled it simply, for when she comes back. The next week passed in near silence, not because things were settled, but because something deeper had shifted. It wasn't just that she was leaving, or that the legal matters had finally hit a lull. It was that, for the first time in years, I no longer felt like I was holding my breath. On Thursday, I received a thank you card in the mail. Cream envelope, same gold ink. Inside was a photo, her, standing under the archway at the farewell party, smiling like a movie poster. Below it, a handwritten note. Despite everything, I'm glad you came. I hope someday you'll remember me for the good. There was no apology, no ownership, just the same carefully chosen words to reshape the story, this time into something softer, easier to digest. I slipped the photo into the same drawer as her letter, the guest book copy, the voicemail transcript, and my file marked for when she comes back. And then, for the first time in months, I called someone just to talk. My friend Miriam. We hadn't spoken much lately, not since her husband's passing. But when I asked her to meet for lunch, she said yes right away. We sat at a little cafe with chipped teacups and too many tulips on every table. We talked about nothing important. Books, weather, her new neighbor's ridiculous wind chimes. And at one point, she touched my hand and said, "You look lighter." I smiled. I feel like I just put something very heavy down. She didn't ask what. She didn't need to. When I got home, there was another letter waiting. This one wasn't from her. It was from my lawyer. Inside was a final notice. The trust had been formally amended. She was removed. Officially, permanently, irrevocably. No more legal games. No more appeals. I folded it neatly and placed it with the others. Then I opened the windows. Let the air move through the house again. I wasn't angry anymore. Not even disappointed. I just felt to clear. And as I stood there, in the quiet of my home, I realized something. People think strength is about standing your ground. But sometimes, real strength is in knowing when to walk away. Not to punish, not to prove a point, but to protect your peace. That night, I slept without dreams. The kind of sleep that only comes when the storm has passed, and you know you'll never step into it again. She thought leaving town meant she'd rewritten the story, but Gloria knew better. With every letter, every voicemail, every whisper behind her back, she stayed one step ahead. Not by fighting fire with fire, but by documenting the truth quietly, patiently, permanently. But in part 4, someone unexpected finds that file marked for when she comes back, and what they do with it changes everything. Part 4. He found the file I'd hidden and asked, "What do you want me to do with this?" It had been 3 quiet months, the kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty. It feels earned. My roses were blooming late that year. The weather couldn't decide between spring and summer, and I had finally gotten used to cooking for one without feeling lonely. Then one morning, I came downstairs to find my son sitting at the kitchen table, a manila folder in front of him. My folder. The one I labeled for when she comes back. I froze in the doorway. I was looking for the garden shears, he said. You hid it in the shed behind the gloves. Because I didn't want it in the house anymore, I replied. He didn't open it, just rested his hand on the cover. Mom, he said quietly, this has everything. Statements, emails, her letter, that guest book page, even the voicemail transcript. I nodded. I wanted to be prepared. For what? He asked. She left. I sat across from him. She left the state. Not our story. He leaned back in the chair, rubbing his thumb along the edge of the folder. I heard she's trying to get a position at a nonprofit, some foundation that works with young women. She's using her growth as a brand now. I said nothing. People believe her, he added. They think she's some survivor of an unfair divorce. Still, I said nothing. What do you want me to do with this? He finally asked. I looked at him for a long time. My son, caught for years between what he saw and what he chose not to see. Nothing, I said. Unless she lies again. Unless she hurts someone else the way she tried to hurt us. He exhaled. And if she does, then you show them the truth. You don't need to destroy her. Just don't let her keep pretending. He nodded slowly. Okay, but until then, I added, we lock it away. Not because we're hiding, but because we don't need to carry it anymore. He stood, walked to the cabinet under the stairs, and slid the folder into the small safe. Then he turned to me and asked something I didn't expect. Do you hate her? I shook my head. No, I pity her. Hate is too heavy to carry at my age. And besides, she taught me something. What's that? That silence can be powerful, but it should never be mistaken for weakness. That same week, a letter arrived. No return address, just a smudged postmark from a city 3 states away. I knew that handwriting before I even opened it. Her loops were too perfect, like someone who always wanted their words to look better than they sounded. Inside was a single page. I heard you kept records. It began. Of course you did. You always had to be in control. I just wanted to let you know I'm doing fine. People here understand me. They see who I really am. I hope you can let go now. This doesn't need to follow me forever. I read it 3 times. No apology. No shame. Just another carefully staged attempt to make me feel like the villain. For remembering what really happened. I didn't respond. But I did sit at the dining table that night and ask myself something I hadn't dared to until now. Had I really let go? Or had I just made the silence so neat, so well labeled, that it felt like peace? The truth came slowly, but it came. I had let go of revenge, but not vigilance. I still checked the news, searched her name occasionally, followed threads. When her face popped up in charity fundraisers or interviews about overcoming hardship, I didn't want to ruin her. I just wanted to make sure no one else got caught the way we had. That weekend, I went to visit my sister in the next town over. We don't talk about the scandal anymore. Not directly. But she poured us tea, sat across from me, and said, "Do you think she knows she lost?" I shrugged. I don't think she believes she ever could. So then what did you win? I thought about that for a long moment. I didn't lose myself. My sister nodded, reached for the sugar, and changed the subject. And just like that, it felt finished. Not forgotten, not erased. Just finished. Later that evening, as I packed my overnight bag, I saw a photo on my sister's mantle. My husband, in his favorite wool coat, standing behind me at our son's wedding. We looked happy, but now I saw it with different eyes. Back then, I didn't know how fragile that moment was, how fast things would unravel. I touched the frame gently, then placed it back and whispered, "You'd be proud of how it ended." Not because I fought, but because I didn't let bitterness win. Because I remembered what you taught me. Protect your name, but never lose your heart trying to. A few weeks later, something happened I hadn't expected at all. I got a phone call from a woman I didn't recognize. Soft voice, careful tone. She introduced herself as a board member from the foundation, where my daughter-in-law had recently begun volunteering. "I hope I'm not intruding," she said, gently, "but I found your number through a mutual contact. I think we should speak." I could hear the hesitation in her voice. Not fear, but caution. The kind that comes from someone who has started to sense there's more beneath the surface. "Of course," I replied. "What is this about?" She paused. "She's mentoring one of our youngest staff members. Something about it isn't sitting right. Too fast, too personal." We started asking questions, discreetly, and your name came up, along with something about a file. I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand. I took a breath. "Yes," I said. "I have documentation. Would you be willing to share it?" She asked carefully, not for gossip, but for safety. I closed my eyes, letting the weight of the moment settle in. This wasn't about old grudges anymore. This was about someone new, another young woman, maybe just like I had once been, giving the benefit of the doubt to someone who knew exactly how to use it. "Yes," I said, "but only in person." We arranged to meet at a cafe halfway between our towns. I arrived early, folder in my handbag, unsure what to expect. When she arrived, I recognized her immediately, not from a photo, but from her eyes. They were sharp, tired, and deeply concerned. Over to cups of coffee, I showed her copies, emails, letters, the record of spending, a scan of the guestbook note. She didn't say much, just listened, read, and finally whispered, "I knew something was off. She's so polished." Too polished. "That's how it always starts," I said. "Charm that leaves no fingerprints." She folded her hands, looked at me across the table, and said, "Thank you. I'll be careful. I don't know what we'll do yet, but at least now, we're not blind." I nodded. That's all I ever wanted. When I left the cafe, I didn't feel righteous or victorious. I felt tired, but not burdened. I had done what I could, quietly, without drama, without dragging her name through tabloids or public shame. I had simply handed the truth to someone who needed it. And as I drove home, I realized this, maybe more than anything else, was what healing looked like. Not forgetting, but passing on what you've learned, so someone else doesn't have to bleed the same way. The seasons began to change again. The last of the summer roses wilted. I trimmed them without sentiment, just the way my husband used to. Quiet, methodical, letting go of what no longer served the stem. There was peace in the routine, in mornings with soft coffee, evenings with old records, nights without watching the phone. My son came by more often now. He helped fix the creaky stair I'd ignored for a year, replaced the bulbs in the hallway, and stayed longer than usual after Sunday dinners. There was no more talk of her, not because it was taboo, but because it was finished. Then one morning, he arrived holding something in his hand, a magazine. On the cover, my former daughter-in-law, dressed in cream, hands folded, Smiling. The headline read, "From Rock Bottom to Rising Again. One Woman's Journey to Empower Others." I took it, flipped through. There she was, page after page of curated words, selective truths, glowing praise. They called her brave, a survivor, a mentor. My son sat across from me, waiting. "I didn't want to hide it from you," he said. I nodded. "Thank you." I folded the magazine and slid it into the drawer next to the salt cellar. "She can build whatever story she wants," I said calmly. "But truth doesn't expire. It waits." He looked at me. Not with pity, not with worry, with understanding. He didn't ask what I planned to do. He didn't need to. I wasn't going to write letters. I wasn't going to expose her. I had already passed the truth into the right hands. Now, it would move on its own. That evening, I sat by the window as the sky turned violet. The old oak in the yard rustled in the wind, its branches strong despite another harsh season. I watched. The lights flicker on in the houses across the street. Familiar silhouettes. Children calling from porches. A woman watering petunias. And I smiled. Because this was the life she would never understand. A life not built on admiration or applause, but on quiet choices, on dignity, on never needing a spotlight to feel whole. I lit a candle for myself that night. Not for her, not for him, for me. For the woman who didn't scream, didn't claw, didn't beg to be believed, who simply stood her ground, with documents, with memory, with grace. And when the flame danced steady in the dark, I whispered what I knew to be true. You can steal money, you can steal reputation, but you can't steal peace. That has to be earned. And I had earned it. Every flicker of it, every breath of it, every soft night that followed. When the past knocked gently, and I didn't have to answer. And that's how Gloria handled it. Not with shouting, not with revenge in the heat of the moment, but with precision, planning, and the kind of grace only life experience can teach. Some people think age makes you softer, but stories like this prove something else entirely. It makes you smarter. Let me know in the comments. What would you have done in Gloria's place? And if you've ever had someone mistake your kindness for weakness, I hope this story reminded you you're not alone. I'll see you in the next one.